Hey everyone, welcome to Serie A Fantasy Tips. Haven't done a video like this in a while where it's not a preview or review week, but just a bonus video with other fantasy information that I thought could be helpful. And as we know today, and as was updated like first by um, the Serie A Fantasy. I saw that before it was on any like sports apps. That was cool that they got to it first, at least here in Canada, that we got the information. But the game between Udinese and Salernitana today was canceled. Now I'm just going to talk about that quickly. But before I do, please like and subscribe to the video. It really helps me out. Tell me what other kind of videos like this you'd like in addition to the game week preview and review videos, and I'll try to make those happen. But talking about this now. The game between Udinese and Salernitana wasn't able to travel due to COVID cases, and so they couldn't go to their away game that was home in Udinese. So that game obviously got canceled. Now, apparently, the players of Udinese and the team still kind of acted like the game was going on right up till the end, and it got listed as like they didn't show up. So I see some sort of saying no, the game's going to be rescheduled, and some people saying it is a 3-0 forfeit and an Udinese win. So I don't know which one's going to come up on top. This is very similar to if you watched things last year, how Napoli couldn't attend one of Juve's game for the same reason. Originally, they docked Napoli a point and they just awarded Juve a 3-0 win. And then later on, that got reversed and they ended up having the game. So I'm assuming even if they are saying it's a forfeited game right now, I have a feeling that it will end up being played at some point. But that's for a later date. What this video is about to be about is how to approach blank and double game weeks, as this is when our first blank game week. So in case they happen in the future, in case there's more COVID cancellations and games need to be rescheduled, I thought this video would be helpful. So please let me know if you enjoy it and other videos like this that you'd like to see. All right. So first, what is a blank double game week? So in a normal game week, you got 10 games. Each team has an opponent, and so they all play once within the game week. Fine. That's what we're used to so far. A blank game week is a game week where not every single team has a match. So not all teams have a match. It could be just 2 teams not having a match. It could be multiple, 4 or 6. Regardless of what it is, it would be considered a blank game week if there's not a full 10. Players that don't play, or that players that play on these teams that don't have a game, just end up getting 0 points. They didn't play. There's no points there. Pretty self-explanatory, and that's what we're encountering this week because Salernitana and Udinese don't have a game. There's only 9 games on the schedule. As of right now, who knows if there'll be more cancellations. But we are in a blank game week right now. On the other hand, a double game week is a game week where any number of teams, so again, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, have at least 2 or more matches to play. So technically you can get triple or whatever, but they have more than 1 game within that specific game week through the fantasy game. And so how this works is players score both games just as they played in both games, exactly how it sounds. So you play, say a player gets no attack returns, they just get their points for playing 60 minutes in both games. They'd get 4 points in the week, 2 from the first game, 2 from the second game. So you literally just add the 2 point totals together, regardless of whether sometimes they'll just play one of the 2, kind of just end up looking like a normal game week. But if they do make an appearance in both games, you will see both those totals added together. Okay, so that is what a blank and double game week is. Now let's see, how would you approach these different game weeks? And these are just my suggestions. Obviously, if you have other ones, put them in the comments below and let me know what you think. But approaching a surprise blank game week, now I don't think a surprise blank game week is an actual thing. I've just kind of titled that, and that's kind of what we're going through it this week. This was a last kind of a decision made on the last day and the last couple hours before the game. You couldn't have really prepared for it too well. And actually it did have a big impact because 2 of the top players that were transferred in this week were Udinese players. I believe it was Molina and Deulofeu were the 2 top players brought in this week, and no one could use them this week because that game was postponed or canceled or whatever it is. So when a situation like that happens, the best way to combat something like this, especially in COVID times, is hold that transfer as late to the deadline as possible. Now, for instance, it may be difficult depending on where in the world you are. As we know, some games in Serie A start at 6:30 in the morning for where I am. Obviously, that's not in Italy. But so you need to make that transfer ahead of time. And sometimes there's just not much you can do about that. I know I haven't been making any last second transfers myself, but the longer you hold that transfer, the better chance you have of not accidentally transferring someone in that won't have a game. Obviously, once the first game happens, there's nothing you can do about it anymore, but at least that allows you to bring in the most possible information you can in order to figure out or to ensure that you bring in a player that will play, or at least their team will play. The other ones are kind of obvious, I'd say. Stay up to date on recent news. That's what I said already. And avoid having too many players on the same team if you're worried. Me personally, I'm happy to double or triple up on players from teams that have good fixtures coming up. And that's a risk that I run. If, for instance, before when I had 3 Napoli players and Napoli game got canceled, well, that's automatically my 3 bench spots right there. I need to hope everyone else plays. Excuse me, in order for me to have a full set of 11 players getting me points. So if you triple up and that team gets canceled, well, you're in tough. But if you're really worried about that, especially times right now, it might be a good idea to have players from a wide variety of teams. Now, sometimes there is like a cup competition that causes games to be rescheduled, and therefore those teams don't play in that game week anymore. And this is what I would consider not a surprised one, but rather a blank game week that we know is coming a week or weeks in advance. For this, you need to use your transfers wisely and prepare for this blank game week by transferring out players that won't be playing in the week. And if you have multiple players, you can start shipping them out 1 week at a time, depending on how far in advance you know. Sometimes it's okay to hold 1 or 2 if you have enough spots on the bench and you don't have a lot of injuries, that's fine. But generally, I try to ship them out of my team in case I need the substitutions. So if, for instance, I know a blank game week for Juventus is coming up in 3 weeks, and I have 3 Juve players, first week I'll sub someone out for a player that it will be playing the next week and the next week. Now I'm set. I'll have 15 players that can potentially play, and hopefully at least 11 of them do. Another thing that you can do is if you have a shuffle available and it makes sense, you can shuffle in or out of a blank game week. So let's go over these two. Shuffling out of one, and remember, for those that play Premier League fantasy, this would be the same as a wild card. Shuffling out would be to set up your team for the blank game week. So do your transfers, make sure you have enough people playing during that blank game week, because sometimes when you're doing this, it might leave you with players from teams that you don't really want, and you wouldn't want to carry that team forward. But after that blank game week, after you've ensured you have a good number of players playing in that game week, just hit your shuffle chip, and all of a sudden you got a brand new team coming out of that blank game week. Shuffling in can sometimes be interesting, especially if you're only given a week and you don't have a lot of time to make your transfers to make sure that you have a proper squad of players and you don't want to take a lot of penalties on transfers. So shuffling in, you kind of just ignore the fact that there's a blank game week until it happens. And so you get to the week that your blank game week is, and then you completely just shuffle it. So then you have the players that you need able to play. Normally you do that if there's a lot of desirable fixtures for a lot of good teams that you're going to be okay having that squad for future weeks to come. If the blank game week just consists of teams that are lower caliber and you'll be relying on lower caliber players, that's when you probably want to shuffle out and just have your players for that game week and then bolster it back with better name players that are going to score you more points. Okay, but that is how you generally would want to handle blank game week, whether you know about it or not. Those are some little tidbits that may be helpful, maybe not. Let me know what you think. Now we're looking at double game weeks, which are always really exciting, and generally you become aware of them before blank game weeks. So with this today, we'd like to assume that at some point Udinese and Salernitana at least are going to have a double game week. Will it happen? Not if this gets pegged as a forfeit. Actually, just tidbit of information as well. Salernitana might get like expelled from the Serie A soon. I don't know how that would affect things. But it has something to do with their ownership and they need someone to take the team by December 31st, I believe. Anyway, not to get off track, double game week. So if there's a blank, there's likely a double somewhere down the road, and you can generally plan ahead for it a little better because you see it in the schedule. And so for that, you can treat it somewhat similar to blank game weeks in the opposite direction almost. Start bringing in players weeks ahead from the teams that have double game weeks rather than shipping them out that you would for a blank game week. You can also shuffle in and out the same way. You can start bringing in players for the double game week, but maybe they're not players you want to hold. So you have them, double game week happens, and then you shuffle out of it to players that you actually want to carry on with. Or you can kind of ignore the fact that a double game week coming up until it comes, and then you shuffle and get a bunch of players that are going to have a double game week coming up. So you might go from having none of those players to 6 because you've shuffled. You have 3 players from each team in the double, so 3 Udinese, 3 Salernitana players. All of them are going to play 2 games. Just know that you'll have to stick with that team afterwards. The last one, and especially will pertain to these teams having double game weeks, is don't force double game week players if it doesn't make sense. I would much rather, and as my example, I'd much rather someone like Insigne playing in the midfield than some Salernitana player playing in the midfield. Even if they have 2 games, I feel more comfortable knowing that I'm going to end up sticking with Insigne. I feel like he'd have a better chance of getting a goal or an assist or something than a Salernitana midfielder would in 2 games. So sometimes it's just worth sticking with the single game player over the double game week player. Don't force it or spend too many points to make sure you have the maximum amount of double game week players. Hope that makes sense. And lastly, this is a double game week is like a prime time to use chips. So we kind of talked about how shuffling, you can use that chip to shuffle in and out of a double game week. But this is kind of when I'd be looking to use a double captain chip. And that's really ideal to use on a double game week. Not only do now 2 players of yours get double points, but they could get those double points over the course of 2 games. So let's think of it for a second, how you can get a point for playing and let's say an assist or in 60 minutes. That's 5 points. That's not even a horrible return, especially for a midfielder. Just to get any attacking return, you're normally happy with that. Okay, so that's 5 points for the game week. You got your assist and your playing points. Great. Now, if you think of it, say your player does absolutely no attacking returns, so no assists, no goals, plays 60 minutes both games. Well, that's 2 for one game, 2 for another game, so that's already 4. And if you double that with a captainship, you're already at 8. So even just getting the playing points, it's pretty decent for when you're captaining at the end of the day. Obviously, you want to get more out of that, but it's still a decent return. 8 points with a player is generally you'd consider to be a good return. So now having 2 of these players like that, well, that is huge. And if you can get, that would be 4 games in total being doubled based on both of your captains. That's a nice return. So that's what I'd like to. I might even consider down the road, if this is like one of the only double game weeks that occurs, I might bring in, for instance, Delafeu or someone and hope that they even just get 1 attacking return. I'll double up on him and then and his games, and then maybe just a single game week for another player that has a good fixture. But just little things to think about. A double captain is really good to use around a double game week. And sometimes you get game weeks that almost all the teams play 2 games. You'll find, and that is when you'd use something like an all-in chip, where if all of your players are having 2 games, then you can almost get 30 games out of it, because all in means your entire bench scores as well. So you could potentially have 15 players playing 2 games each. And that's how you could get some major points on the game week. Okay, so I hope that has made sense. Please like and subscribe to the video. Haven't been using the other social media platforms as much recently, but they're there as well, and I do intend to bring them back and using them after the YouTube channel gets a bit more of a following. Almost at 70 followers. Try to be that 70th and keep it growing after that. Thanks so much, and I hope you liked the video. Take care.